So if you were given any rational number or any number in general, how do you find the inverse? Let's talk about it. So inverse or reciprocal of a number by definition is something that if you multiply with the original number itself, the net value of that product should be equal to 1. When you obtain that, you can say that you have found the inverse or reciprocal of a number, correct? So if you were given, let's say any number in general, let's say the number is p, how would you find the inverse of that number? Well, the technique is very simple. You just define a new number such that the numerator of that number is 1 and you simply move that original number to the denominator. So the p, whatever that number was, goes in the denominator and that gives me the inverse of my original number, right? Now, instead of this integer, what if you are given a rational in the form of p over q? How would you find the inverse of such a number? Well, the answer is very simple. You will define a new rational number such that the denominator of first, it goes in the numerator part, and whatever is in the numerator, it goes in the denominator of your new rational number. So p will come here. So the inverse of p over q will simply be q over p. And how exactly would you prove it that this is indeed the inverse? Well, you just take two numbers and multiply them with each other. You notice that the denominators cancel, the numerators will cancel, and then the net result will be 1, right? So this is how you find the inverse. As simple as that. It's not complicated at all. So let's take some examples to better understand this technique. The first example we'll take is, let's say, a decimal number, 1.5. What will be the inverse of this number? I need to find this inverse, okay? So we can find this in a very simple way that will simply define 1 over 1.5. That's how you define the inverse. But it is not a good method to write a number just like this. So you need to reduce it down to its simpler form. So 1 over 1.5 can be written as 10 over 15, or it can be reduced down to its simpler form. You will say that it is 2 over 3. So inverse of 1.5 in a simpler form is 2 over 3. It would not be wrong to just write something like this, 1 over 1.5, but it doesn't usually make a good impression when you just leave a decimal number like this. So rather, I would like to reduce it down. If you want to further convert it down to its decimal form, you will divide 2 over 3 and you will say that it is 0.667 because it goes on forever. So at some point you have to truncate some number. So inverse of 1.5 in decimal form is 0.667. In the end, when you multiply these two numbers, the net result should be equal to 1. Let's take one more example. Let's say my new number is 12 over 3 and I want to find the inverse of that, okay? Because it is a mixed number, I will first convert this into an improper fractional form, right? So that will be 5 over 3, right? Now it is very simple for me that whatever is in the denominator, it goes in the numerator, and the numerator of original number, it goes in the denominator. So inverse of the 5, 3 is 3 over 5. And we also know that when you multiply these two things together, what you will get is just 1. So this was my original number and this is the inverse. At this point, I will say that there is one interesting or one critical point that you should also know about is that what is the difference between opposite versus the inverse, because these are two different things in mathematics. Students often will get confused when they want to find the opposite of a number versus the inverse of a number, okay? So let's say there is a number 4. The opposite of 4 is what? It is negative 4. Opposite means you change the sign, right? But when you're finding the inverse of 4, it will be 1 over 4, right? You are keeping the sign value of a number intact. You are simply inverting that number into something so that the multiplication with the original number becomes equal to 1, right? So take one more example. Let's say my next number is negative 5. What will be the opposite of negative 5? It will be plus 5. But what will be the inverse of negative 5? It will be negative 1 over 5, right? We are keeping the sign value of the original number and the reciprocal of that number as the same, but we are simply taking whatever was in the numerator, bringing that in the denominator. So this is how you distinguish between opposite versus the inverse. In opposite, you change the sign value of a number. In finding the inverse, you keep the sign value as it is, but you simply invert the number such that the multiplication with the original number becomes equal to 1.